This book preview is for a novel called Dear Bully, which is a collection of shorts. They are letters and essays written about bullying. Each author has either been the bully, has been bullied themselves, or has witnessed bullying in their youth. So, here we go. Dear Bully, the first story here is by Laurie Faria Stolarz. Dear Bully, I'm not sure if you remember me, but I definitely remember you. You were my first real bully. The boy who made me fear getting out of bed in the morning, who made me dread the end of the weekend because I'd have to see you the next day, and who prompted me to take self defense classes. I never knew that boys could be so cruel until I met you. It was middle school, seventh grade for me, eighth grade for you, and we took the bus together every morning and every afternoon. We didn't know each other. I mean, to this day, we've never had a full conversation. We didn't hang out in any of the same circles, nor were we members of any opposing clubs or teams. So you had no reason to hate me, but you still did. Or at least you treated me as though you did. I remember the first time I saw you, slick dark hair, designer jeans, high top sneakers, and a leather jacket. That one outfit probably cost more than my entire wardrobe at the time. So was it my lack of style that made me a target, or the fact that I didn't fight back too hard? At first, it was just name calling. Dumb, dork, stupid, ugly, trash bag, bitch, loser, ugly, asshole, stuck up, snotty ass, bitch, nasty idiot, snob, moron, stupid ass, wipe, loser, scumbag, ugly, bitch, douchebag. I'd stare out the window of the bus, trying not to show any hint of emotion, even though I could feel it all over my face. I knew that others were looking too, checking for my reaction. I'd bite the inside of my cheek just shy of drawing blood, pretending that I was someplace else, wishing that you'd get bored when I didn't respond. But instead, you just got more people involved. Other boys, not all, but some, were drawn to you and helped you out with your ridicule. I'd be called a stuck up snob when I ignored all of you, and then a nasty ass bitch when I didn't. If any of my friends were around, they kept a distance from me for their own survival. Eventually, they stopped taking the bus altogether, opting to have a parent drive them instead. Sometimes I was able to hitch a ride, but more often than not, I'd end up back at the bus stop, back with you. It went on for months like this before things got physical. Before you started pushing me from behind, shoving me out into the street at the bus stop, tugging my hair, pulling at my clothes, slapping the back of my head, and spitting in my face. While your cohorts thought it was funny as hell, others stayed out of it, most likely relieved that it was me you were harassing and not them. The route home was the worst because our bus didn't show up until 30 minutes after we were let out for the day. 30 minutes. Without a single teacher or administrator to monitor what was going on. 30 minutes. For you to try to keep yourself occupied. That's where I came in. People told me that if I ignored you, if I pretended that you didn't bother me, you'd eventually give up and move on to the next victim. So why didn't that ever happen? It was hard for my mom to hear about the terrible time I was having with you. She was working a full and part-time job and couldn't be there to bring me to school or pick me up. She begged the principal to have a teacher stick around at the end of the school day until the bus came. And the principal agreed. But it never happened. My mother told the principal that you were the one harassing me and that it was his job to ensure a safe environment for children. Again, he agreed. But again, he did nothing. And so one morning, one of my older brothers, the captain of the high school football team at the time, he decided to accompany me to the bus stop. He got in your face. He threatened you. And he pushed you back a couple of times. And in that moment, you seemed intimidated. Your cohorts certainly were. But while they stopped harassing me completely, and even apologized for it, you continued the very next day. One afternoon the following week, it was raining, and the bus didn't come until an hour after school got out for the day. And in that time, you managed to push me down onto the pavement and kick me with mud until I was covered, until it was in my hair and in my ears and up inside the crevices of my mouth. I remember getting up, tears streaming down my cheeks, and seeing you laughing. and wondering how anyone could be so mean. That was the last time I took the bus. From then on, I walked to and from school. It took me just shy of an hour and would have been well worth 2. I didn't see you much after that. Then I'd heard you'd moved away. A couple of years later, I changed schools. And then, flash forward about 15 years, I was in my 20s working in the writing center of a college. My job was to assist students with their essays and research papers. One night, just before my shift was over, a student came in wanting me to help her with an interview assignment. She was asked to interview someone whom she really looked up to and respected, and then to write an essay based on her findings. To my complete and utter shock, that someone was you. The interview detailed your whole life's story, from early childhood, a story that had been anything but charmed, to say the least, and how, despite all odds, you'd been able to turn things around for yourself, which is why the student chose you for the assignment. I won't go into your life's details here, because they're your details to share, not mine. But suffice it to say that in that moment, reading that student's interview about how life had been for you growing up, I couldn't condone any of the things you'd done to me in the past, but I could almost understand why you'd done them. After the student left the writing center, I couldn't believe what a coincidence it was that out of all the schools and all the writing tutors, that girl just happened to make an appointment with me. But then I wondered if maybe it wasn't a coincidence at all. If maybe it was meant to be, that I was meant to see you in a different way and understand you a little better. And now I think I do. No longer your victim, Laurie Faria Stolarz. Love Letter to My Bully by Tanya Hurley. Dear Stephen, you never forget your first. The first time you were forced to eat pink-colored glue on the bus and were told it was gum even though you knew it wasn't. The first time you were snapped in the ear with a rubber band in algebra class and were made to sit still in your seat despite telling the teacher, who was also afraid, all while trying to figure out the value for X. The first time you were shaken down for lunch money or tripped in the hallway, or the first time you were forced to cower in fear on the school bus or were humiliated in front of teachers and classmates in ways you could have scarcely imagined. The first time, tears streaming down your face, the teacher told you to stand up for yourself, but did nothing to help. The first time your virginity was publicly disputed in graphic detail before you even really knew what virginity meant. The first time your innocence was taken from you, your faith in people and your illusions about the world and your place in it were thoroughly and irretrievably shattered. I tried to deal with you, Stephen, in any number of ways. By ignoring you, avoiding you, reporting you, and eventually even fighting with you. As I've gotten older, I've psychoanalyzed you in hopes of trying to understand you, to figure out how people can be so awful to one another, whether it's learned behavior or genetic predisposition. I've tried to excuse you, putting your callousness down to a bad upbringing, broken home, lack of discipline, insecurity, or maybe just a lack of love in your life and compassion in your soul. I've even tried to forgive you, although I have to admit that hasn't worked out very well. Like some unwelcome ex-boyfriend who friends you on Facebook or an embarrassing prom date who pops up in old family photo albums, you are unavoidable, even all these years later. My daughter even knows your name. As must be obvious by now, I've spent a lot of time pondering you, which some might even say obsessing over you. Way too much, in fact. I've searched for you on the internet to find out who you are now and what you're up to these days. Not because I care, but perhaps for an opportunity to gloat. I've dreamed about getting revenge on you more times than I can count. And if I ran into you on the street today, I would have just 2 words to say. Thank you. Your cruelty and insensitivity were a wake-up call, a lesson in life I would not have learned otherwise at such a young age. You prepared me for the world beyond our small town. More than anything, you motivated me. Because no matter how hard I tried to block you out, some of your insults, your criticisms stuck with me, eating at me, making me doubt myself until I had no choice but to persevere and to succeed. If for no other reason than to show you. See, Without you, there would be no me. At least not the me I came to be. Every time I struggled with a difficult college course, a hopeless job interview, a terse rejection letter, a thankless boss, a petty colleague, a bad relationship, or just some impatient jerk on the subway, it was your face I saw. You have taken many shapes and forms since, but after all these years, it's still you. Our relationship is a special one, and I've learned that no one can take your place. From you, I realized that life is harsh and not always fair. I learned that not everyone is well intentioned. I realized that not everyone will like you or respect you, no matter what you do or how much you try to please everyone. I learned to rely on myself, to believe in myself, to do for myself, and to fight for myself. Having family and friends to provide a shoulder to cry on is a wonderful thing, and I've taken advantage of their love and kindness more times than I can count. But it is your adversaries that strengthen you, that toughen you, that sharpen you, that force you to be the best you can be, to keep trying no matter how difficult the task or unachievable the goal, to prove them wrong. Because you victimized me, I no longer allow myself to be victimized. You broke my bully cherry, and I've never been the same. Love, Tanya. Dear Audrey, by Courtney Scheinmail. Dear Audrey, I'm counting on the fact that you'll never pick up this book. After 20 years, there's an enormous part of me that feels choked up by the thought of you, afraid to open my mouth because what I might say might make it worse. At least when I finish this, the things I bottled up will be there in writing. Except now I don't even know where to start. We were friends in 7th grade. For a few months, we hung out together after school nearly every single day. And then I remember you started spending a little bit less time with me and a little bit more time with Jessica Cyril. At lunch, you stopped caring whether I saved you a seat next to me. My mother noticed you didn't call so much anymore, and when I told her I thought maybe you wanted to be Jessica's best friend instead, she assured me that you'd come around. Maybe the problem was that I kept inviting you to things. Maybe I should have just left you alone. One day, you pulled a Bloomingdale's catalog out of your locker. It must have been during study hall because in my head, I see a few of us sprawled out in the hallway, uniform skirts rolled up and boxer shorts worn underneath our attempt at modesty. You flipped the book open and pointed to different items, a pair of leggings, a sweater with patches on the elbows, and asked whether I liked them. The phone rang that night, and my mother came into my room. "Audrey, for you," she said with a smile that meant, "See, I told you so." When I picked up, you said, "I can't believe you actually liked those overalls. They're so immature. And that pink baby doll dress was hideous." There was a muffled sound, and I asked you what it was. You pretended that you hadn't heard a thing. Then you said maybe your sister had picked up the extension, but I knew you were calling me on three-way, probably with Jessica Cyril. And when I hung up, the two of you would stay on the line and talk about how awful I was, how babyish and inferior. I did the same thing with you a couple of months before. You called Beth Fogel and asked what she was planning to wear to Lorelei Martin's birthday party, even though you knew full well she hadn't been invited. It occurred to me just how mean we'd been to Beth, and I was sorry for that. But even more, I worried about turning into someone exactly like her. As time went by, you picked on the things that most embarrassed me and found flaws I didn't even know I had. You laughed at my fear of elevators, at my tendency to refer to my childhood babysitter as a big sister. You told Senora Baldwin that I cheated off your Spanish quiz just because I dared to sit in the seat next to yours. You said I should meet you at our old pizza place, and then you never showed up. I thought it was my fault. I was too short. I wasn't pretty enough. I didn't like the right music. My parents didn't have enough money. I didn't stand up for myself, ever. And now I wonder if part of the problem was that I never confronted you. Instead, I retreated and I cried in private. But I suspect it was something else entirely, something I won't ever get to know. Something like that indefinable chemistry between two people when they like each other, except the opposite. Then you started complaining about having little headaches. they came often and you said Tylenol did nothing to relieve them, I thought maybe you had a brain tumor, and I felt guilty for every bad thought I'd ever had about you. We were in 8th grade by then. The summer had done nothing to subdue your distaste for me, and we had a class meeting to vote on our song for the middle school sing-off. Miss Halloran stepped out of the room, and you dropped your head down toward your desk, pressing your fingers onto your temples. "Oh, my little headache," you moaned. "I just can't get rid of it." Jessica Searle hit you in the side, and you both started laughing. Lorelei Martin turned to me. We hadn't been friends in a long time. She'd always been more your friend than mine, so it made sense that she pulled away when you did. But suddenly she had a look of such compassion on her face, and she said, "You know what she's talking about, don't you?" It was more of a statement than a question, and it hit me all at once like a punch to the gut. Little Headache was your nickname for me, and everyone knew. My cheeks were burning, and there was this feeling coming from deep inside me, as strong as anything I'd ever felt before. I was ashamed just to be myself. In all of my life, I'd never felt quite again so strongly. Even now, I can't even write about it without wanting to cry. Even now, I feel the heat on my cheeks and something flapping inside my chest. You left school a year later, and by the end of 9th grade, things started to turn around for me. For a long time, I had fantasies of bumping into you on the street, preferably when I was surrounded by my friends. Maybe I would become a world-famous writer, and then you'd read about me. Or I could marry a movie star, and you'd see our wedding covered on Entertainment Tonight. It's funny that even as I've gotten older, my desire to prove my worth to you has not dimmed that much. The friends I have today are the coolest, most extraordinary group of people I've ever known. And they are loyal, and they are plentiful, and they are mine. It's as if I think that you saw how good it was now, that it would make the reality even more valid. A few months back, I heard about a horrible story out of Florida. A 15-year-old girl had been severely beaten. Her attacker was a troubled boy whose brother had committed suicide. The boy had been dating the victim's best friend, and when the victim purportedly said something to her best friend about her boyfriend's dead brother, something inside him snapped. He was arrested and I think tried for attempted murder, though I'm not sure what his sentence was. Reading about those kids, my stomach turning, I was overwhelmed by their pain. My own story of adolescent cruelty seemed so simple, so harmless. I didn't ever even get slammed into a locker. Certainly no one was bringing weapons to school, but of course it didn't need to end in tragedy to be transformative. For better or worse, Audrey, you changed my life. With pride, I remain Courtney. Slammed by Marlene Perez. When I saw the book just lying there on the bleachers, I wondered if you'd left it there on purpose. If you had left it for me to see all those hateful things people said about me, about everyone. No one had passed the slam book my way. What would I have done if they did? I'd like to think that I would have done the right thing and not written anything. I turned to my page first. Now I understood why they called it a slam book, because when I read what was written about me, I felt as though an invisible person was repeatedly slamming me into a wall. I couldn't even see who I was fighting. Or could I? After I shook away the tears, my vision cleared and I recognized almost everyone's handwriting. A guy from my chemistry class, the one who would smile at me sometimes, wrote about how I'd performed a certain sexual favor for him. The only place that ever happened was in his imagination. And there was stuff from people who I thought were my friends, too. People like you. I recognized your handwriting right away, but couldn't believe you had written those things. That my boobs were too big and my brain was too small. I mean, we weren't best friends or anything, but I thought we were friends. What about all those games we'd ridden to together? We double dated for homecoming when we were sophomores, remember? I held your hair back when you threw up all that cheap wine you and your date were guzzling. We talked about how your brother died and even about getting out of this town, moving somewhere far away where nobody knew us. I thumbed through the book and I saw your handwriting on every page. You hated so many people. But most of all, I think you hated yourself. I thought I knew you, but I didn't. I thought we were friends, but we weren't. And then you walked back into the gym, a panicked look on your face. You didn't see me right away, so I slid the book into my backpack. What's the matter? Did you lose something? I asked. You frowned, the panic on your face growing. It's not important. I met your eyes. I thought I lost something too, I said. Turns out, I never even had it.